Welcome to Human Marketing, a weekly podcast for B2B marketers unpacking how brands can stay authentic, demonstrate authority, and build trust as AI floods our feeds with content. I'm Chris Nelson, founder of Human Video. We remotely produce podcasts and other video content with real humans and just the right amount of soul. I'm delighted to be joined today by Juliana Kelly. Juliana is VP of Growth Marketing at a Series B SaaS called Cloudsmith. Before joining Cloudsmith a few months ago, Juliana was Global Director for Digital Demand and Campaigns at Recorded Future and spent 7 years at HubSpot in multiple roles, finally ending up as Global Campaigns Manager. Welcome, Juliana.
It's great to be here, Chris. Thank you for having me.
It's all good, all good. I should say, full disclosure at the start, Cloudsmith is a company I know really well because they've been my client for about 2 years. And I've kind of been on a journey with them. When I first started about 2 years ago with them, there was 30 people in the company, and now there's, at our last offsite a couple of weeks ago, there's nearly 100.
Yeah.
So they've been on a real journey, and I'm close to that. I join your marketing meetings, Juliana, every week, which is kind of wonderful as a contractor. And so I hope we're going to have a really cool chat about, I guess, the task ahead of you in your few months into your time at Cloudsmith, and I guess that particular job you have of marketing and for what is a really technical product in a kind of technical world, in a very SaaS world. I'm really looking forward to the chat. Just to kind of get started, can you tell me a little bit about, I mentioned your kind of potted history there. Tell me a little bit about what you did in your previous roles, maybe particularly interested in what you got up to at HubSpot.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I was a HubSpot employee, I was a HubSpot customer. And I'll tell you, one great career choice you can make is to find a product you love using and then work there. So not everyone is as fortunate as I was in that respect, but I had for a long time as a student, as an early employee at another SaaS company I was with, had really loved the philosophy and the tool set that HubSpot had put out into the world. The philosophy being inbound, this idea that drawing people in with helpful and, for lack of better words, really human content was a great way to engage with them. And it was a great way to support them on whatever their buying journey was. And so I credit them for, that concept being such a big piece of my professional journey early, and was really, really lucky to spend some of my formative marketing years with the company there. I first joined in an interesting role doing verticalized marketing. So HubSpot at the time had a very traditional sales process, traditional marketing process, where they spoke to kind of one audience altogether. Hey, you are someone who's trying to attract leads. What does that look like? And it turns out that story didn't resonate as closely with certain types of businesses, even though the use case was actually really similar. So if you were a school, you're not trying to attract leads, you're trying to attract students. If you are a nonprofit, you're not trying to close deals, you're trying to get donations. So my first role at HubSpot was trying to take that HubSpot marketing motion story and actually translate it for these verticals out in the world, or these different segments of buyers that might not have understood the narrative as it was traditionally being told, even though the product itself actually still could really help them solve challenges that they were trying to in this world. So I did that for a little bit. And loved that role, but after 4 or 5 years was itching for a change, was itching for something slightly different. So eventually transitioned into managing the HubSpot user groups program. I am not an event marketer. I'm not a community marketer, but it was a chance to take the power of HubSpot users and use it for something good. And really what was blocking us from doing that wasn't the passion that people had for the product or even the desire to learn and to share with each other. It really was more of an operational challenge. So I joined that program and had a chance to really kind of rebuild it from the ground up, focusing more on scale and on operations. How do we have stronger communication between us and our local user group leaders? How do we enable them with better education and presentations that they can go share? How do we actually track the impact of a customer's life cycle with HubSpot, if they are someone who regularly attends user groups or not. And that was a really, really awesome experience in program management, in meeting people from all over the world, and seeing all the different ways that um, HubSpot powers these businesses, which was great. And then ultimately, um, there was this year 2020 and this thing called a pandemic that happened, and an in-person events program was actually not not the best program to be working on. So, we of course did everything in our power to turn that into a virtual events program. And then there was this time I had on my hands to try to go solve another challenge. And at the time, that challenge was helping HubSpot prospects, buyers, fans, um, figure out how to run a business during a pandemic. And so HubSpot did the thing that I love about them, which was just to say, how do we help people? How do we help people understand this? How do we help people navigate this? And that led to this program called Adapt 2020, which was a series of webinars and pieces of content. And I had the privilege of leading kind of this ongoing educational series, all of the different topics of which for each of these things each week focused on just something to help people navigate, the world as it was changing today. Hey, you've never set up an online store before, and now you kind of have to do that because that's the only way to do business. How do you do that? Hey, you've never run events online before. How do you do that? Um, that work transitioned, long story short, into a full-time campaign role. There was something powerful behind this idea of, well, what if we all rally behind these topics and we all support them together and we all try to have this these more, I guess, unified pushes into the market with these stories. That transitioned into a full-time campaigns role, working alongside product marketing and trying to just figure out how do we take the go-to-market stories that HubSpot cares about and actually turn those into big collaborative demand generation pushes. So that was that was roughly where my time at HubSpot concluded, was within doing that kind of work. And as it turns out, when you're doing that work, you get to take the experience you've had working across digital for X number of years at that point, and connecting all those dots to figure out how to go run this thing together. And it translated really nicely into a role with Recorded Future, a threat intelligence SaaS platform, in leading their demand gen team. And what they were struggling with was kind of the same thing. How do we figure out the right messages for our market? How do we put the go-to-market team? How do we get the go-to-market motion in sync and activate against those things? And so that transitioned really nicely into that role, where I did that for 3 years, and we got to kind of grow and shape what the definition of demand gen was. Was it email marketing? Was it search optimization? Was it webinar programming? That all really kind of grew and evolved over the time I was there.
That's all amazing. Yeah, I can empathize with the struggles of in 2020 of putting an event on. I was somebody in 2020 who made their living getting on airplanes and flying around the world and making films. And that was very interesting indeed. It was like, I look back kind of in horror with it at that time, to be honest with you. I had to
Yeah.
seriously pivot. And but actually, my pivot was kind of remote production, and I kind of dived into the world of Zoom, I guess, and trying to help people do that better, was my thing. And to this day, I still use some of the assets that I created at that time, like that. I have a video that I send to people to kind of help them with their lighting and their audio and everything. And those were the foundations of what I do now,
Oh, of
when I
course.
look
Look at us
back at
now.
it.
We
Oh,
hang out
indeed,
every
absolutely.
hang out every
Well,
week remotely, and you've done some great work, may I say, helping us to figure out how to do that too, which is, it's been
yeah, and
excellent.
it's just the acceptance of creating video remotely is,
Hmm.
it's totally okay, even in an enterprise B2B world, to create content like that if it's done
Of
well
course.
enough.
Of course.
Um, and that is, I always look back and think that's one of the main legacies of that time for what I do, definitely. Um, and with that all, like even the HubSpot time, it feels like, Juliana, you're kind of involved in both of those companies at times where things were like changing, and even just saying like the concept of demand gen, was
Yeah.
surely in its infancy in part of that time. And
Yeah.
I totally agree that HubSpot feel like to me like they were the name it's where I first heard the concept of inbound, and like
Yeah.
their main event obviously famously is
Yeah.
called inbound, like that's their
Sure is.
thing, but it was the thing that they kind of put out into the world, didn't they, in a big way in terms of like their point of view on the world of business marketing was really fresh at the time.
I love that point. Like the concept of demand gen is changing. Yes, because how people engage with the world is changing. So if that definition isn't constantly evolving, it means you're not adapting to the way that people are actually going out and looking for information and researching things. And so, one of the worst things you can do is kind of stand still, right? So yeah, I love looking at it that way. Demand gen should be a constantly evolving discipline.
So just thinking about, I kind of wanted to talk, I guess, about Cloudsmith. They're
Yeah.
um, a B2B SaaS, but they're in the world of software supply chain management, which, before I got involved, didn't really know what that was at all. I suspect if we stopped people in the street, they wouldn't have a clue what that even meant.
Yeah.
It is kind of pretty deep, techie stuff. You're marketing to engineering teams, I guess, but primarily the people you're talking to. How do you go about kind of humanizing the marketing of that? There's a lot
Yeah.
of technical information and features and whatnot that you can talk about, but tell me a little bit about how you're now approaching humanizing such a
Yeah.
kind of technical product, really.
Oh man, that's a good question. Well, maybe I'll start actually maybe a few weeks before I started at Cloudsmith because I too
Yeah.
was a little bit afraid. We'll downplay it. A little bit afraid of going into an industry that I knew so little about. HubSpot was easy. I was a HubSpot customer. I lived it. Um, I do not go build CI/CD pipelines. I would not know how to. So one of the things that I think was helpful for myself and that our team really encourages each other to do and has tried to build more of a culture around is putting ourselves a little bit more in the shoes of the audience that we are marketing to, first and foremost. Um, Leading up to starting at Cloudsmith, I took like a 101 coding course. And by that, I mean like the first two sessions of it, because boy, like you don't learn coding in 2 weeks. But just like putting hands on keyboard and saying, oh, so when you build code, what you are trying to do is just solve a series of little problems, and they add up over and over time, and you borrow from these, and even just understanding what that day looks like or feels like in the most minuscule way, I think was interesting and was helpful, and is something that I would encourage anyone in marketing to do. If you don't understand what the life of the person you are selling to looks like to some degree, then like you're gonna have a really time going and connecting with them. Um, I think that is piece one, is just trying to understand at a really core level, I guess, the job to be done for the people that you are talking to. And then, of course, there's things like learning the product, understanding the competitive landscape that you should be studying up on before you join somewhere, but also continuing to educate yourself on. Like, if you aren't reading two or three things that you don't completely understand, but should help you get a better understanding after you've read them at least, the world you're marketing into every week. Again, like you're probably not pushing yourself hard enough to connect with the audience that you're trying to sell to. I think there is some, especially with technical marketing, there is some level of rigor and research and discomfort that you have to put yourself through to try to put yourself into that world a little bit. That I would encourage people to think about. I should say this is not true of everyone on our marketing team. We have people on our marketing team who could code most developers under a table and are really understand that world. But so that's one thing, is just take the time to do that work. Um, from there, I think it also then, no matter how technical of a product you are trying to go market, still comes back to problem solving. When we go think through content, think through campaigns, think through programming, one of the biggest pushes I have for the team is let's start with the problem. Start with the problem, start with the solution. Um, Or if you have a feature that is releasing or that you want to talk about, that's great. Know what that is, and then back into the problem and the solution. Because at the end of the day, if you're just talking tactics, you're probably maybe educating someone, but you're not connecting back to the value that you offer them. So I think no matter how technical the sale is, or the job to be done is from a marketing perspective, there's some fundamental problem solution messaging work that probably needs to go into the foundations of any campaign, any content that you're building. What makes people tear their hair out at night? And it's the same thing for developers, right? Like, it might be something extremely technical that they do to solve it that you don't understand, but the root problem that they're facing isn't that complicated. Usually it's, I don't have enough people on my team to go do this thing, and that's a pain point for me because I can do more if I have a more automated system behind that. Like, that could be true of so many things in this world. Or it's, I don't have enough visibility into this thing, and my manager's asking me a bunch of questions every day, and I can't give them a good enough answer. Um, or it's something like, um, I professionally want to improve my career, and to do so, I feel like I need to be able to have a better explanation for how it made the team more efficient. So despite how technical the next 4 and 5 steps are down of that messaging ladder of that product and feature matrix, oftentimes at the core of it, it does come back to understanding what is the human behind the keyboard that you are talking to, trying to work on. So I think there's a piece of that for us, and it is, I would say, demonstrably trickier when you work in a really technical space to make sure you are connecting the dots between those two things than it might be in other spaces. We're not a perfume company. We can't just go put an ad out on the TV where someone says, "Oh, excitement. They're selling excitement. Great." But I think the concept remains the same.
Amazing. No, that's great. I mean, thinking of the importance, I guess, of knowing those pain points that and the struggles that your customers are having. How would, as a marketing team, do you go about finding those, like, in the company, and what ways would you go about that?
Yeah. I am extraordinarily fortunate at Cloudsmith. I was fortunate at Recorded Future. I was fortunate at HubSpot to work with really smart people who oftentimes are closer to those problems themselves. Or maybe I should say at HubSpot, a little bit less so. We were the ones who were close to the problems ourselves at HubSpot. We were saying, oh my
Yeah,
gosh, we have too many lists. This database is getting huge. And so HubSpot product team would say, oh, we're going to learn from you. We're going to go create a feature that auto deletes
of
lists,
course.
whatever it
Yeah,
was.
yeah.
At Cloudsmith, though, it's definitely flipped on its head a little bit. It is figuring out, how do you tap into your development teams? How do you sit down and talk to the product team? How do you really get close with your sales organization? Oh my God, please get close to your sales organization. They are the ones who are on the front line. Your SDR team, they're the one who are trying to quite literally get a person to say yes to even exploring a conversation with you. They know all of the objections, all of the things that people ears perk up about versus they don't. So it's plugging into those different prongs of the company. And I think making it easy to have them engage with you. It is having regular connections with the folks, the leadership team in those organizations. Um, it is using resourcing. Like, we pride ourselves on transparency as a company. Anyone can get a license to Gong and go listen to, the sales calls that we have here. Great, go do it. Anyone can go read customer tickets and see what someone chatted into support about. So awesome, go do it. So it's relying on both, I think, the humans to partner with and to explain those things and to really be your, for lack of a better word, human connector into that. And then it's also relying on technology so that you're not putting all of the burden on those people, right? Like, that's how you show up and be a good partner too, is to say, I'm not going to put this all on you. I'm going to, like, actually go do some research myself, and I'm going to come back to you for the analysis of that stuff. So,
Brilliant. Yes.
yeah.
I mean, those are all the sort of things I guess I was thinking of, said gone is good,
Yeah.
and that, I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I hear is, like, those are really great sources. And actually,
Yeah.
knowing how the level of transparency internally in Cloudsmith is really interesting. Like,
Yeah.
there's so many really open conversations on Slack, and, like, I'm one step removed, but I get to see some of them, and it's wonderful. It's
Yeah.
wonderful, and challenging as well in different ways.
Yeah.
But you certainly get
Yeah.
to see what's happening and hear the customer's voice and the customer's problems in that.
Yeah.
When in my time at Cloudsmith, there'd been a few people actually during that time looking after marketing, Juliana, and
Yes.
there was a moment where like, oh, somebody said we've got a new VP of marketing coming, and that was a bit of a moment for me. I was like, it could go either way,
Yeah.
and I was so pleased when you arrived. Like one of the first things you did was arrange for the folks at Wistia to do an
Yeah.
hour-long talk with the entire team about
Mhm.
video.
Yep.
And I mentioned to you, I had Sam Bolter on the podcast a couple of
Yep.
weeks ago. The most amazing chat with Sam is fabulous. And
Yep.
I've been a user of Wistia for over 11 years. Just before you arrived, I was championing getting a
Yeah.
license for it, and I got it. It was there when you arrived. But tell me a little bit about your thoughts behind doing that, behind getting those folks
Yeah.
in to just have a chat about all things video with your marketing team. Like, why? What was motivation in
Yeah.
that, and what do
Oh,
you feel about all that?
so I'll try to, sum it up into a few points. But first off, always learn from there. You always try to find ways to learn from others. There are so many people in this world who know more about different aspects of the things that we work on than I ever will. And that is great. Embrace that. So find people who are smart and engage with them and build that network and make it easy for your team to build that network. And we are all better off for it. Um, Second, we are a really technical B2B SaaS company selling to developers. And sometimes I think we think that means that we need to be boring, for lack of better words. If you are a company like Wistia, you are trying as hard as possible to not be boring. You have the craziest campaigns coming up. You have the most fun products. So, like, to some degree, I think it's also this push to say, even if the product you're selling is technical, you are still selling to people at the end of the day. And people like humor, people like stories, people like things that they can connect to on an emotional level. So, to some degree, I also wanted to encourage the team to just learn from companies that already have that in the DNA of their marketing. Um, in the last but not least is the video piece, of course, right? Like, why invest more in video? You know, uh, it is such an important format for us to think about this year, both as a dedicated starting and stopping point for things that we build. And what I mean by that is we recently worked with you actually on a brand new start to finish demo of our product because I want people to be able to see, to explore, to understand, to experience what we're selling. And sometimes words just don't do that well enough. And so that's worth investing in something really dedicated and special to produce. Um, the other piece about video that I love is it is such a versatile way to get more out of things that maybe even weren't intentionally meant to be video to begin with. So, my hope for the team is that we think about things that from the blueprint stage are meant to go be built and from the ground up are these dedicated video projects that we should be taking on this year. How should we engage people with video? What are the concepts that are hard to explain? What are the concepts that are fun, could be more interesting if we did them in video versus through writing? But then also, how do we go repurpose more things this year? The company had somewhat of a webinar motion running already. We're working on, finding really exciting partners and improving the production quality of those webinars. But also, once that webinar ran, I think the company, the team to some degree was like, all right, that's done. What's the next one we're running? And it's like, oh, you have 45 minutes of amazing content. I hate to break it to you. Most people don't want to go back and watch 45 minutes, but you know what they do want to watch? A few really interesting takeaways that we should be doing more with. So the other piece of it too, or of that conversation was how do you then repurpose, reuse? How do you invest in taking something and getting more out of it through video? And that could be you already have basically a script written for something because it was a really great blog post. Great, record a few of those quotes. Or you've got a webinar you recorded. Great. How do you chop that up and like get more of that onto LinkedIn? Um, so that was a piece of it too. It was net new video creation. How do we invest more there? And then also repurposing. How do we go use video to squeeze more juice out of the things that we're doing already?
Amazing, and yeah, completely agree with all of that. And it's so interesting for me knowing the history of that, and
Yeah.
then the encouragement of that. Like, I think it's fair to say that the webinar maybe like wasn't the most exciting thing historically in Cloudsmith,
No, no.
and it got pretty technical, and
Yes.
it was not a Wistia webinar. which can
No,
be,
no.
unbelievable productions
Yeah.
full of all sorts of creatures and stories and amazing
Mhm.
kind of side stories.
Yes.
But yeah, that has been like one of the great things I've seen is like even just putting
Yes.
more energy into the webinar and making there's a whole
Yeah.
potential there, I think, as well, of really doing that
Yeah.
even better.
And
And people miss that. I think it's
totally.
so often just becomes a very a kind of dry piece and
Yeah.
can be done really
Yeah.
differently, in a way that you do with other things. It just never seems to make it. That joy never
No.
seems to make it to the webinar.
No, and
And
and the beautiful thing is, now that we've had that meeting, it's almost given the team permission or excitement to go think like that more moving forward. So you can see in the Slack threads and the team meetings that we have, how much more excited and invested people are, and just throwing out ideas that they might not have thrown out before that tie back to like, oh, well, should this be done in video? Should we repurpose this thing? And I'd be remiss if I didn't also take a second to just say how grateful I am to have such an amazing team at Cloudsmith who are passionate, who are excited, who want to eh, give people great experiences on the other end of, on the other end of the keyboard. But it to some degree, it's also helping us build that muscle of how do we think about doing that?
100%. And yeah, I'm in the unique position to know those folks as well. And I
This is
totally agree. And
yeah,
it's been really interesting for me, kind of, in some ways helping them, do that more.
totally.
And still, we're still in that process, and that's been fabulous.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
so much potential as well to do more. It's great.
yeah.
Shifting gear slightly, Juliana, we
Oh,
can't have a
shift.
conversation about all this without mentioning AI.
Oof. Okay.
I know, yeah, the whole, I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
it's kind of fundamental, I guess, to what I'm doing. Like the whole point of human video is
yeah,
this like thesis that in a world full of AI content, that the authentic human stuff may hopefully rise to the top, or certainly differentiate
right.
itself. That's the hope,
Yeah,
anyway. I always
yeah.
say that on this podcast, and I go, well, will somebody play that back to me in a year's time? When the machines have taken over, going like, yeah, good luck, Chris. Yeah. But it was really interesting because even just the short time I've been recording the podcast, like literally the past few weeks, I feel like there's been almost a change or an acceleration in
Oh my gosh, it's
in
crazy.
what, like,
Hmm.
it is existential for me particularly,
Oh
maybe.
yeah,
But at the same time, the more things are appearing, like I see and hear more and more people saying, like that AI avatar, just isn't cutting it for me. I don't care how
yeah.
beautiful and perfect it is. It has
Hmm.
no soul, and it's never going to make me cry. It's never going to make me want, love it. It's never going to make me want to do something, and I
Yeah.
certainly am never going to trust it.
No.
Crucially, so I mean, how, like, you have potential in your role to kind of dive into this stuff more than most. You're talking about scaling and doing things, creating more content, maybe. Like there's an option there to kind of dive into that too far, potentially. How do
Yeah.
you feel about all that? What are you seeing? How do you balance that?
Yeah.
What to you is a great use of AI? What is AI slop?
Yeah. Ah, what a good question. First and foremost, AI is here. Like, there isn't a world where we backtrack and we say, I refuse to use this thing, therefore it becomes irrelevant. I don't think that's possible at this point. And that's okay. A few thoughts on that. One is there's this interesting side of marketing now where we actually have to care about showing up in AI. So before, we've written for human. We've created video for human. There is this interesting side of things now where we have to think about how do we create things for AI. I won't dive as much into that, but I do think that is something that if you are not thinking about it from a marketing perspective, uh, you're probably missing something interesting. Uh, the other side of it, though, which I think is the one that is probably more pertinent for us to discuss right now, is what role does AI play in your team and the output of your team and the construction of your team? Um, we're a little bit spoiled in that we have a really technical product. And because of that, it actually is a little bit easier for us to get away with anything AI focused. And by that, I mean, like, we've tried AI chat responses on our website. AI did not understand the nuanced questions around package formats and upstreams and, it did at a basic level, but when someone asks a follow-up question and dives a little bit deeper, there really isn't replacing a human expert that we have found as much for that yet. That might change. Um, when it comes to content creation, though, I do think AI is a fantastic tool to help with productivity and with getting you started. Um, I myself absolutely use ChatGPT when it comes to brainstorming ideas sometimes. Or, oh man, I wrote this thing and I just want to shrink it down to 2 paragraphs. Like, can someone help me with that? Um, it's, that said, you can still tell when something's written by AI. Like, there's this it is hard to explain, but if someone put a piece of if someone put a blog post in front of you that was written by AI and when that was written by a real human, you would know the difference. It's that like, it is there still.
Yeah, it's the 6 fingers of writing, isn't it?
Yeah, right. It's a great way of putting it, Chris. Yeah, the
That's the
six
way I
fingers of
think about it. I am a
looks
visual
human,
person,
feels
and
human.
when the images
Yeah,
came along, I was like, "Oh, that's the way in which it's terrible," and
yeah,
I couldn't necessarily pick it up with the nuances
yeah.
of language and the writing, but I'm like, "Oh, I see what the copywriters are talking about now."
100%. Um, so use AI, let it help you get started, and then have a human on the other end of that who is still polishing that thing before it goes out into the world. Have a human that is adding their voice to it. Add a human who is sharing a personal experience that AI can't pull from. You know what AI doesn't have? Real life experience. So AI can't say, man, I was on this customer call once and this is the problem that came up that really illustrates the point I'm trying to make in this blog post. So think about that, inject that stuff in. It's really important still. And so use AI to get started, use it to repurpose. It is that much quicker and easier for us to take those webinars and to turn them into uh, a bunch of shorts for YouTube now than it used to be. That's great. Someone still needed to go through that webinar or have the idea to do that to begin with, or someone had to still look at that thing and say, is that on brand enough for us? Or should we make sure the image is a little bit sharper? So have a human who's looking at that thing and who still has a traditional brand guidance to who is uh, looking at that thing as if they are the receiver on the other side of it and really questioning the quality and the output of it. Um, and then, yeah, like take those resources that you were going to put into that and put them somewhere else too. That's the thing. People, there's certainly, I won't go too deep into it. Like there is risk of AI, taking work away from people, taking bandwidth away from people. But I also think there's more additional interesting things we could be doing. So take the thing that you were going to go do and do it 5 times in a more personalized way now because you have the extra bandwidth to go take it and make 4 versions of it. Or take that thing you're going to do and like now go focus on the distribution plan for it a little bit more. So use it where you can. Have a human, please have a human screen it. Pretty please. Inject your own personality, inject your own stories. And then, hopefully you use that extra time to go find new projects that you can explore.
I love all of that, and yeah, fully agree with what you're saying. It's something I have to think about a lot, and like even the thing that I'd heard earlier that I said would come back to was you mentioned keeping up with the changes in like, and I think you maybe said search, and like I had another
Yeah.
client posted just today. They said, had a great inquiry, probably will become a fab customer. And in the chat, they always say, is there anyone I can thank for a referral? Most of their business comes from referrals.
Yeah.
Where'd you hear about us?
Yeah.
And for the first time, that person said ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
this was one of the directors of the company was saying this, and he's like, that's a whole moment for us. Like we now
Yeah.
need to think about this, and everyone kind of needs to think about that.
Yeah.
I'm not. I see that discussion a lot. I know that it is kind of coming from like traditional SEO work and even
Yeah.
like where you appear on Reddit and all those seem to
Mm-hmm.
be, what's feeding that. And
Yeah.
it seems to be a little bit of a mystery currently how to kind of crack that puzzle, but that's an interesting time.
Yeah, for the first time, I would argue there are like your core set of KPIs that you care about as a marketing team, and then there are also kind of secondary KPIs that you have. For the first time, one of our secondary KPIs is search traffic uh, from LLMs. Not if anything. not because I think we have this grand control over it just yet, but if I want us to be monitoring it, I want us to be conscious of it. I want us to go back and see if certain things are working really well to get us showing up in those channels. So, yeah, it's definitely an interesting one.
Fab. Um, just to kind of bring in the land a bit, the last thing I'd
Yeah.
love to just focus on for 5 minutes even is thought leadership content.
Mm.
You recently, we had our offsite. I love the way I say we had our, like I work for Cloudsmith. I
Oh,
don't, but I
basically,
am
come
like, I
on.
have more merch than most employees, like it's how, well, how much affinity I have with the brand. But yeah, at the recent offsite, people come from all over the world and they're together, and you'd said, like, let's take that opportunity to grab some of the senior folks and get some kind of thought leadership content
Yeah.
going from them. Like,
Yeah.
what's your thinking behind that? How
Yeah.
how do you hope in the future maybe to promote that throughout the company a bit more, and just
Yeah.
a little bit on like kind of personal LinkedIn content, commercial page LinkedIn content, just that balance of like you mentioned distribution a moment ago. Like, tell me a little bit
Yeah.
about your thoughts around all that.
Yeah. It's a great question. But maybe I'll start with the content itself and then talk distribution kind of secondarily. Although, you know, aren't those two things woven together? Um, in terms of content itself, I think one of the biggest encouragements I had for the team upon landing on the shores of Cloudsmith uh, was like, stop talking about Cloudsmith. And I mean, like, we have an amazing product and we have people who are so proud of what they've built and who truly, understandably so, think that we are revolutionizing and making revolutionizing the way DevOps works and making people's lives better. And it's totally, totally relatable to want to go shout that to the world and to feel frustrated when not enough people know that. It's so understandable. Like, if anything, it is a great problem to have, to be like, oh my gosh, we're so proud of the things we do. We want everyone to know about them. That's awesome. Um, and at the same time, that's not the first handshake you make with someone, right? Like, when you go meet someone for the first time, it's not immediately like, well, this is me, this is who I is. But it should be, and especially not in B2B world. Let's go back to the top of the hour when we talked about inbound, right? I still believe some of those concepts are true. People search for solutions to problems. People look for smart people to learn from. People care about people, not necessarily brands. And so all of this, I think, roughly translated into us saying, well, how do we get a little bit more content out there that's not necessarily about us, but that's just helping people think about the things that are causing them trouble on a day-to-day basis and ways to make their lives better. Um, and so that can be done at this really like kind of grand macro level. Here's how DevOps has changed. These are these big themes and, shifts in the industry you should care about. And so, we have leaders in our company who are really well positioned to talk about that stuff. And I wanted to help give them a platform to do that. And so you'll see us putting out more content now that is just reflecting on changes in the industry. How does that mean you should be shaping your team in the future? How does that mean you should be thinking about your budget next year? How does that mean you should be reimagining your tech tool stack? Those are the types of things that I want us to have a point of view on. I want us to earn people's trust around before we go inserting ourselves into that conversation. And we do that on the more technical side of things too. I was just talking with we brought on someone for developer relations. You want to talk about how to humanize things and how to speak more to people. You invest in humans who sit squarely in community and who are a human API between your community and you. But we were discussing content
Human
for
API,
next
I
quarter.
love that.
Yeah, human API. Yeah, we have a human API now. It's great. But we were discussing content, and it was like, well, let's not talk specifically about this feature. Let's talk about this. I won't get too technical into it, but where we landed was like, let's go. You don't want to talk about.
We'll lose them, Juliana, if we start
Yeah,
mentioning.
I'll lose. Yeah, we won't go into that one. But the point of it was like, let's go talk about this thing that's kind of tangential to what we do, but that is helping to solve a really big problem that if you are a technical end user, you have right now around security. Um, More people will be interested in that thing. It'll be immediately helpful for them. And by the way, if you're interested in that thing, you're also probably a good fit to learn more about how our product helps you with the thing that's like two steps away from that. Um, and so from the like, we're trying to talk to CTOs and like help them shape what their team looks like and earn their trust, all the way down to the really technical DevOps engineer who's trying to just do their day job better. There are ways to increase thought leadership that aren't just about you. And that's not to say you shouldn't be in the picture. Like, we want to do a better job of showing off what we do and how we help you solve your challenges and help you solve your problems. But can we have a little bit more of an intentional progression between the thought leadership work we do and then eventually that, once we've kind of earned the right to go have that conversation with you?
Amazing. I love all of that. And thought leadership content is kind of a big part of what I do, and
Yeah.
I think it's such a wonderful play on personal LinkedIn these days, and then what you can do with that in terms of promoting that with like thought leadership ads and
Yeah.
that whole human connection rather than the corporate. So it's great for just humanizing the brand as well.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful play these days. Juliana, this has been amazing. How can people find out, I guess, more about you and like kind of keep up with what you're doing, what you're putting out into the world at all,
Yeah.
and more about Cloudsmith as well?
Oh, fair enough. Well, I'm always on LinkedIn, rarely posting things that aren't about Cloudsmith, but I am there, happy to connect, happy to learn more. Like I said, building that network of people is so important, even if they're not in your industry, even if they're not in your role. It's, we are here to help each other, and we should be doing so. So that's, always happy to do that. And then, yeah, Cloudsmith, I'd like to say that you'll be hearing about us just because we've got a really big future ahead of us. So whether you like it or not, you'll be hearing about us. But I encourage people to come check out our website, look at the blog content the team is creating. Go to YouTube, check out some of the videos we're going to start rolling out with. Hopefully more and more really great stuff to come.
I love it. I hope to be part of that.
We look forward to you being a part of that, Chris. Yeah.
Juliana, thank you so much for your time. This has been awesome. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me, Chris. I really love the work that you do, and I love just, the message that you're trying to reinforce with this podcast. So it's an absolute joy to be a part of it.